In the sleepy town of Eldridge, nestled against the shadowy sprawl of Blackwood Forest, the old Whitley house stood as a chilling reminder of its grim history. Known locally as the Nightmare Nest, the house was a hotspot for daredevils and ghost hunters, but few dared to trespass after sunset. The story of the Whitley house begins with the unexplained disappearance of the entire Whitley family one stormy night in 1954, a mystery that remained unsolved, leaving a permanent dark cloud over the property. Mia, a young and ambitious documentary filmmaker, became obsessed with the legend after stumbling upon an old newspaper clipping. The idea of crafting a film around the house's eerie past and its supposed hauntings seemed like the perfect project to launch her career. Driven by curiosity and the allure of capturing real paranormal activity on camera, Mia gathered a team of 4: Alex, her best friend and sound technician; Derek, a skeptical cinematographer; Lisa, a medium known for her sensitivity to the supernatural; and James, a local historian familiar with Eldridge's darkest corners. The team arrived at Eldridge on a cold, foggy evening. The town itself seemed to whisper secrets, with its ancient, gnarled trees and the ever-present mist that clung to the ground. As they drove through the deserted streets, the locals watched from shadowed doorways, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and warning. Upon reaching the Whitley house, the group was struck by its ominous presence. The house loomed at the end of a long, overgrown driveway, its windows dark and gaping like the eyes of a skull. The once grand exterior was now marred by decay, the siding peeling and the porch steps sagging dangerously. Despite its dilapidation, the structure exuded an inexplicable magnetism, pulling them towards its dark interior. Mia and her team set up their base in the main living room, where a chandelier hung crookedly from the ceiling, its crystals long since stolen or shattered. The air inside was musty, filled with the scent of mold and decay. As they unpacked their equipment, Mia explained their plan to spend 3 nights in the house, using various types of recording equipment and spiritual mediums to uncover the truth behind the hauntings. The first night was relatively uneventful, with the team experiencing little more than a few unexplained noises and the occasional cold draft. Derek remained skeptical, attributing the phenomena to the house's age and structural issues. However, as the second night unfolded, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Around midnight, while reviewing footage, Alex pointed out a shadowy figure that seemed to flit across the corridor leading to the basement. The figure was barely visible, but its movement was unnaturally swift and jerky. Intrigued and unnerved, the team decided to focus their efforts on the basement, the site where the Whitley family's personal items had been found undisturbed for decades. Descending the creaky steps into the basement, the air grew significantly colder. Lisa, the medium, began to tremble, whispering that she felt a strong, malevolent presence. She described seeing a man, his expression twisted in rage, his hands covered in what looked like blood. This spectral figure, she claimed, was the patriarch of the Whitley family, and he was not alone. As Lisa communicated with the spirit, the temperature dropped further, their breath visible in the icy air. Suddenly, all the lights flickered out, plunging them into darkness. The team scrambled for their flashlights, their beams cutting through the blackness like knives. In the chaos, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the basement, sending them rushing toward the sound. There, in the dim light of their flashlights, lay a pile of old, yellowed papers that had fallen from a hidden shelf. Among these papers was a diary belonging to Mrs. Whitley, its pages filled with frantic, scribbled entries that spoke of paranoia, a haunting, and a fear so palpable it seemed to leap from the pages. The last entry was dated the night of their disappearance, ending abruptly with the words, "He has found us." Engrossed in the diary, the team did not notice the subtle changes occurring around them. The air thickened, and a low hum began to resonate through the walls of the house. It was as if the house itself was coming alive, responding to the presence of its past occupants. As Mia read aloud from the diary, a sudden, horrifying shriek filled the basement. It was a sound of pure terror and agony, cutting short as it had begun. Startled, the team turned to see Lisa, her eyes wide with fear, pointing toward the shadows. There, just beyond the reach of their lights, the outline of a figure could be seen, its features obscured but its intent unmistakably sinister. The team stood frozen, the weight of the house pressing down on them. As they watched, the figure seemed to flicker, like a faulty old film, between the forms of a man and something far more grotesque, something that defied the natural laws of shape and form. It was as though the shadows themselves were alive, twisting and writhing in the dim light of their flashlights. Derek, despite his skepticism, filmed the figure, his camera's night vision turning the shadow into a ghastly, green-tinged specter. The figure began to move towards them, slow and deliberate, as if savoring their fear. Mia, though terrified, continued to read from Mrs. Whitley's diary, her voice trembling. Each word seemed to draw the figure closer, and with every step it took, the temperature dropped further, their breaths becoming visible puffs of white in the freezing air. "Please, we mean you no harm," Mia called out, her voice echoing off the cold stone walls. "We just want to understand what happened here." The figure stopped, and for a moment, the only sounds were the soft whimpers from Lisa and the steady drip of water from a crack in the ceiling. Then, as if compelled by Mia's words, the figure's form stabilized, revealing a man in his mid-40s, wearing what appeared to be the tattered remains of a dinner suit. His eyes were hollow, the pain of his eternal torment clear in his gaze. "I am Harold Whitley," the figure spoke, his voice a hollow echo of what it once might have been. "This is my house, and you are not welcome here." James, the historian, stepped forward, his curiosity overcoming his fear. "Mr. Whitley, we've read your wife's diary. We know something terrible happened here. Please, tell us your story so we can help." The specter of Harold Whitley seemed to consider this for a long moment before he began to recount the tale of his family's doom. He spoke of a hidden room in the house, a cursed place where he had discovered ancient artifacts buried beneath the floorboards, artifacts tied to dark rituals and even darker entities. Harold confessed that his obsession with these artifacts had brought a malevolent presence into their home, one that not only haunted them but eventually led to their mysterious disappearance. As Harold narrated, the air around them grew denser, the shadows darker, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to thrum with an unseen force. Compelled by the story and determined to discover the truth, Mia asked, "Where is this room? Show us, so we can help set you free." With a mournful glance, Harold pointed towards a section of the basement wall that looked no different from the rest. "Behind there," he said, "but beware, for its secrets are not meant for the living." Driven by a need to uncover the truth and perhaps put an end to the hauntings, the team decided to break through the wall. Using tools from their van, they chipped away at the bricks, each strike sending a shiver through the house, as if it were protesting their intrusion. After several tense minutes, they broke through, revealing a small, hidden room, dust-choked and filled with strange, ominous symbols scrawled across the walls. Inside the room, amidst a collection of arcane objects, lay a large, ancient book bound in what appeared to be human skin. Its pages were filled with indecipherable script and disturbing, detailed illustrations that twisted the viewer's stomach. Derek, ever the skeptic, reached out to film the book closely, but as his fingers brushed against its cover, a sudden, violent force threw him back against the wall, knocking him unconscious. Panic ensued as the team rushed to Derek's aid, finding him pale and barely breathing. As they tended to him, the air grew thick with the scent of sulfur, and the ground beneath them began to quake. The walls of the hidden room started to crumble, revealing even darker recesses behind them, as if the house itself were opening up to swallow them whole. In the chaos, Mia managed to grab the ancient book, believing it held the key to ending the curse. As she clutched it to her chest, the spectral figure of Harold Whitley faded into the shadows, his final words echoing in the rumbling air, "Beware the heart of darkness within." With Derek incapacitated and the house seemingly coming alive around them, the team realized they had to escape before it was too late. Carrying Derek between them, they stumbled through the collapsing basement, dodging falling debris in the ever-encroaching darkness. The house moaned and groaned like a dying beast as they made their way back upstairs, the floorboards buckling and the walls bending inwards, as if trying to trap them inside. As they reached the ground floor, the front door appeared impossibly far, the hallway stretched out by some trick of the malevolent force that seemed to warp the very fabric of the Whitley house. The portraits on the walls, once mere faded memories of a bygone era, now looked alive, their eyes following the team's frantic movements, expressions twisted in grotesque smirks and frowns. The air was thick, heavy with dread and the scent of rot that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. As they half-carried, half-dragged Derek towards the door, the house's hostility intensified. The chandelier above swung wildly as if caught in a storm, casting eerie, dancing shadows that seemed to reach out towards them with claw-like fingers. Each step was a battle against an unseen force that pushed back against them, as if the very air was trying to force them deeper into the house's dark heart. Lisa, gripping the ancient book Mia had seized, began to chant in a voice that was not entirely her own. The words were strange, guttural sounds that seemed to resonate with the house, causing the oppressive atmosphere to momentarily falter. This gave them just enough reprieve to reach the front door. However, as Alex reached out to throw it open, the door slammed shut with an inhuman force, the sound echoing through the house like thunder. The team recoiled as the temperature dropped sharply, their breath visible in the air, forming clouds that seemed to be sucked towards the ceiling, coalescing into a thick, dark mass. From this mass, a deep, menacing laugh resonated, bouncing off the walls and filling the space with malice. "We cannot leave," Lisa said, her voice trembling as she clung to the book. "Not until we break its hold." Mia, determined and fierce despite the terror clawing at her mind, nodded. "Then we find its heart. We end this now." Turning to James, she asked, "Where would it be?" "The heart of the house?" James, pale and shaken, thought for a moment before replying, "The attic." "It must be." In old homes like this, the attic often held what was most precious, or most feared. With no other choice, they made their way to the staircase, the house seeming to groan in protest with each step they took. As they ascended, the air grew colder, and the darkness seemed to press in on them from all sides. The light from their flashlights flickered, as if struggling against the darkness that wanted to consume everything. Reaching the attic door, they found it covered in old, rusty chains, padlocked with no key in sight. Derek, regaining some of his strength, pulled a heavy iron candle holder from the wall and began to smash at the padlock. After several tense, frantic moments, the lock gave way with a loud snap, and the chains fell to the floor with a clatter that sounded like chains in a dungeon. They pushed the door open, and the attic revealed itself to be a room out of time. Dust motes floated in the beams of their flashlights, dancing like tiny spirits in the air. The room was filled with old furniture covered in white sheets, giving the appearance of ghosts lurking in the shadows. But it was the far end of the attic that drew their eyes, where a large, ornate mirror stood covered by a black velvet cloth. Approaching the mirror, Mia felt a pull, an almost magnetic draw. As she reached out to pull away the cloth, the house trembled violently, a roar filling the air as if it were the cry of the beast itself. The cloth fell away, and the mirror's surface rippled like water, images flashing across it too fast to catch. "The heart," Mia whispered, staring into the depths of the mirror. "It's showing us." The images slowed, revealing scenes of the house's past, the Whitley family in happier times, then twisted into scenes of horror, rituals performed in the basement, dark figures dancing in the shadows, and then the night the family disappeared, shown in harrowing detail. As they watched, transfixed, the mirror's surface began to swirl again, and a figure started to emerge from it, the form of Harold Whitley, but twisted, his features malign and terrifying. He stepped out of the mirror, the air around him crackling with dark energy. "You seek to unbind what you do not understand," the apparition of Harold growled, his voice like the grinding of stones. "This house is not just a building, it is a vessel, and I am its keeper. You will not destroy what I have protected for so long." With Harold's declaration, the air turned icy, and the team felt the oppressive power of the house surge once more. They were in the heart of its darkness, confronting the spirit that had haunted the Whitley house for decades. As they prepared to face Harold, the spirit keeper, their resolve was tested to its limits, knowing that the struggle to free themselves and the house from its curse was about to reach a critical, terrifying climax. Mia, holding the ancient book close, found her resolve strengthening as she faced Harold. The book seemed to pulse with a power of its own, its pages fluttering as if caught in a wind that didn't affect the rest of the attic. She opened it, and the strange, arcane symbols on the pages glowed faintly in the dim light. Lisa, still channeling the energies around her, began to chant, using the words inscribed in the book. Harold's form flickered, wavered like a flame in a draft. The house responded with a low, menacing rumble, the floorboards shaking under their feet. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling as the house's very structure seemed to protest against their actions. "We have to break the mirror," James shouted over the cacophony, pointing to the ornate mirror from which Harold had emerged. "It's the source of his power, the portal between his world and ours." Without hesitation, Derek picked up the heavy iron candle holder that had broken the padlock earlier and swung it with all his might at the mirror. The first strike caused a sharp, ear-piercing screech as the surface cracked, a web of fractures spreading across the glass. Harold screamed, a sound so filled with pain and rage that it chilled them to their bones. "Keep going!" Mia yelled, her voice nearly lost in the tumult. Derek swung again and again, each hit weakening Harold further as the mirror structure began to crumble. The apparition of Harold thrashed, trying to reach Derek, but Lisa's chants held him back, creating a barrier he couldn't cross. With a final, resounding crash, the mirror shattered, pieces of glass raining down around them. Harold's scream reached a deafening crescendo before cutting off abruptly as his form disintegrated into nothingness, swept away like dust in the wind. The house gave one last shudder and then stilled, the oppressive atmosphere lifting like a dark cloud clearing after a storm. The air felt lighter, and for the first time since they had entered, they could breathe easily. The remnants of the mirror lay scattered on the floor, harmless shards of glass reflecting only the attic's dim light. The team stood in silence, processing the night's harrowing events. Mia closed the ancient book with a soft thud, its glow fading along with the malevolent presence that had pervaded the Whitley house. "We did it," Alex said, his voice a mixture of relief and disbelief. "We actually did it." Lisa, exhausted from the ordeal, nodded slowly. "Yes, but we must ensure that nothing like this happens again. We need to seal this place, and this book, for good." Mia agreed. "We'll document everything first. Then we'll make sure no one can misuse the power of this house or the secrets in this book." As dawn broke, casting light into the attic, the team packed up their equipment, each movement heavy with the fatigue of their ordeal but buoyed by their success. They left the Whitley house with a sense of closure, the morning sun dispelling the last of the shadows that had clung to the old structure. However, as they reached their van parked at the edge of the property, Mia took one last look back at the house. A chill ran down her spine as she noticed something unsettling. From one of the upper windows, a faint, almost imperceptible glow seemed to flicker. She squinted, trying to discern if it was just a trick of the light or something else, something they might have missed. The house, though quiet now, still held its secrets, some perhaps deeper and darker than they had imagined. As they drove away, the Whitley house stood silent against the horizon, its story far from over.